Hello, folks.
Hello. He's got headphones on, so I couldn't hear the music finishing, and that's why I was very shocked and surprised when here we were. All right.
So welcome back to Totally Tanked. This is episode 50.
50.
And to mark episode 50, we're going with the most obscure tank we can find.
The most obscure. There are more
but...
obscure. Anyway, I'm Rob. He's John. We're
Hello.
Totally Tanked, the tankiest podcast in Tankville. Mm-hmm. And today it's the 9th of September.
Which is very important because we're going to be talking about current events in Ukraine, and in 2 days' time it could be really wrong.
And how the All Blacks just lost to Le Bleu, which I'm very happy about.
Yes.
But the tank today we are talking about is the Al-Khalid.
No, Khalid.
Mm-hmm.
Hisham from Egypt saw that we were planning to do an episode on a Islamic tank and rushed to make sure our pronunciation was not completely awful.
And I read it and I thought I'm absolutely horrible at speaking any sort of foreign. So I speak two things, Strine and foreign, and I'm not very good at foreign, so that's why...
I'm not that good at Strine, frankly.
But, for those who don't know, Strine is the way Australians speak.
It's a contraction of Australian Strine.
Strine.
Yep.
But
cool.
Look, it's so the Al-Khalid.
Khalid. We'll get there.
Yeah, one day. It's also called the MBT 2000.
If it's exported to places that aren't as keen on Ibn Al-Khalid, the Islamic conqueror,
which we'll get to him.
Century.
But the MBT 2000 is also a running shoe. Just want to throw that in there. It's also known as the Immortal Tank. John's called it the
Tank of the Pure.
The Tank of the Pure.
Now, the reason for that is that Pakistan is called the Land of the Pure.
The Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Yes, and we're going to touch briefly on the history of Pakistan because it's very complicated, and we don't want to mess it up. But so Pakistan is an Islamic republic that was split out of British India. They have developed this tank, the Al-Khalid. We are going to talk about that. Before we go any further, though,
Patrons.
It is time to thank the patrons.
Oh, lovely people.
The best people in the world, Rob.
Cheers to them.
Cheers to the patrons. So our top tier patrons who want to be associated with us, well, we've got a couple who just don't want their names out there, and they've got their reasons. That's fine. They're still giving us money, so it's great. Chris Peze, Cornelius, Gihok, Pear, Stamps, and Maxi Mixed. Who's just come on, is new. And the next level patron, we've got James O'Hagan, Jay Beckman Straussman, I think, Strauss, Anton Gorbanov, Jamie Stokes, Chris Doyle, Steve Matthews, Spencer Davis. I'm going to have to wait until
Master Corey, Scotch 12.
David Mulvaney, who disappeared off our credits thing for a while, and it's not his fault, that was ours. And Floaty Burb, Carter Heller, Brian Jenkins, and I think we've got everyone. So that's awesome.
And hello from Tasman, Alexander, Glenn Hock, and Alan. Mm-hmm. Welcome back all.
Yes, Alexander Vlad. Yes, and Alan. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're hoping that the sound and the video are all working better this month
than last time. Please shout out if in the comments if everything starts going bad again.
The weird thing was, while the live feed was problematic, it actually all sorted itself out. So now Alexander says, please drink Warsaw Pack beers and do the TR85 one day. We will do the TR85 one day. Rob's in charge of the beers. So it's Goek for our patron. Thank you, Goek.
There you go.
Nice one. Okay, that's the patrons acquitted for now.
Wonderful people.
Thank you, folks. All right, let's talk very briefly about Pakistan.
Or not General Khalid?
Ibn Al-Khalid?
Yes.
Khalid?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes, so the expansion of the caliphate after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, some of the greatest conquests in human history, the Persian Empire ripped apart, the Byzantine Empire ripped apart, whole of North Africa turned Islamic, and Ibn Al-Khalid was one of the greatest leaders of this time. So
converted by Muhammad himself,
yeah.
And named by Muhammad as the Sword of God, and led a number of those conquests of Arabia and the Middle East and all sorts of other places, and Syria. It's probably the main area was having all sorts of things.
And if you want to know more about this period...
692 to 642, so he was only 50 years old when he passed away.
Yep, which was not that bad an age for a warrior in that era. Just briefly, if you're more interested in this era, my alternative YouTube channel, Every Naval Battle in History, has been doing a lot on the Byzantine Arab Wars. And has covered quite a lot of that history, albeit from a maritime perspective. So, if you're interested in more of that. Anyway, so this is named after a great Islamic hero. And that's part of Pakistan, as you might have gathered from what we said before, came out of the partition of India. Now, I actually went into this with the contemporary historical view, looking it up, of Mountbatten, wasn't he foolish, wasn't that nasty, he partitioned India, 1 million people died. You actually dive into it, the British weren't that keen on partitioning India. They were much keener on handing over a united India to the successor country, which was essentially being led by Gandhi. Now that's controversial. The British definitely made a lot of mistakes. 1 million people died. That's a lot of mistakes. That's an incredible number of mistakes, even by the 20th century standards. But it was more to do with the Muslim population of India saying there is no way in hell we're letting the Hindus boss us around. And given the behaviour of parts of Hindu India in the last 50 years, not entirely without reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be weighing in saying who was right and who was wrong.
Nobody's right and everybody's...
I do not have that level of knowledge, and I don't have the time to dive into it.
We don't have any skin in the game, so it's not a question of we have any right to be able to say, yes, all these people were right or all these people were wrong. We just feel for all the people who have suffered under it. And also, hello to Jamie Stokes. Thanks very much for joining us. Mm-hmm. And we'll get on some other stuffs about Pakistan later and its connection with our lovely city of Canberra here.
Oh.
Yes. Do you remember this? No. We'll come to it.
Okay.
Anyway, so the tank itself. Where does the tank come from originally, John?
Look, it's interesting in that it was a Chinese tank that went nowhere in Chinese service. It was pretty much a prototype they abandoned. But the Pakistanis had got their teeth into it by then and started developing it into their own tank, and it's very heavily based on the T-72. Coming out of China. We didn't get into the development because the development was really cool. I love what they did with trialling everything from everywhere.
I think that was a good idea. And just they had certain things that worked and certain things that didn't. So anyway, it was...
And what Abrams did not work in Pakistan. Now, Abrams famously had problems with its air filters if they weren't getting changed as often as they should.
And just the gas turbines don't work in those hot, sandy environments.
But they trialled Challenger. Did not like the way the Perkins diesel engine in Challenger worked in Pakistan. And the gun on the Khalid's 125mm smoothbore built to a Warsaw Pact standard. But the Pakistanis have said, how do the British make their cannons? And they said, electroslag recovery. So they've got the same steel making and...
they got the prints off the French in order to be able to make their own 125mm guns.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. But also the gun making technology they took straight from what the British were doing with Challenger 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Which, as we discussed in the Challenger episode, makes for a extremely accurate gun, but it does make one that's prone to, if sunlight falls on it and heats differentially along the barrel, it will bend not like a banana, but as for a gun barrel, similar, which is one of the reasons why the British have extensive thermal jackets on their cannons, and similarly the Al-Khalid needs extensive thermal jacketing to spread out the warmth.
Yep. Anyway, it's designed from 1993 to 1999 and produced from 2001 to present. They're still working on. They have the Al-Khalid, the base standard, and then the Mark 1, and then
it's a little confusing in that you've got Al-Khalid, Al-Khalid 1. Al-Khalid 1 is actually Al-Khalid 2. The easy ID is the first one, the Al-Khalid, has the little triangular, sad little explosive reactive bricks next to the gun on the turret. Whereas the Al-Khalid 1, they've integrated the armour better, so instead of having little bricks sitting out the side, it's a much smoother turret that comes further forward. And you will see it for those on the video stream in the pictures, that distinction. But otherwise, I hope that makes sense to listeners.
Maybe. All right, 46 tons. So just in the range of your normal T-72 type of tank.
Yep. But, I mean, that's getting to be light tank territory for the West.
Yep.
Yeah. And 125mm gun.
Yes. Yeah. Come on, John. They're not the West. They're quite happy to say that they are themselves.
Yep.
10 metres long, 3.5 metres wide, 2.4 metres high. Crew of 3, driver, gunner, and commander. Fairly cheap for what they are.
I don't know. They look expensive to me. It's around $5 million.
Yeah. I mean, it's got a number.
That's heading into Abrams territory.
Is it? Oh, crikey. There you go. As we said, it's got the 125mm autoloader smoothbore gun. Starts out with 39 rounds in your in the Al-Khalid, and then moves it up to 49 rounds for the gun in the Mark 1. Which, when you've got an autoloader that's firing out 8 rounds a minute or 9 rounds a minute for the Mark 1, doesn't last you very long.
Well, if you can acquire 40 targets...
but if you've got your mix of your HE, APDS and everything else, all the other types in there, and you've only got 39 rounds, and you've how many... You're not doing a whole... do they choose that because they thought that's only how long they weren't going to be able to get off more than that many rounds if the Indian Army, if the Arjuns come crashing over the border?
If an Al-Khalid in combat fires 50 shots in anger, it will have done well.
Yeah.
In fact, if any tank fires 50 shots in anger, it has done well. I'm not sure. I mean, World War II, the Americans had a requirement of 70 rounds, but that was including HE for a more general purpose use.
Because they were supporting infantry. I mean,
yeah.
I guess the T-55s that are being employed in Ukraine at the moment are mainly being used as indirect fire platforms, and so they're just... You wanted to punch out rounds from them as much as you can.
Yeah, but then you've got an ammunition dump sitting next to it, sort of thing. Although shoot and scoot. Well, we will get to events in Ukraine. Trust us, folks. That will come up second half of the show, probably about an hour from now.
All right. So you got your standard 7.62 coax in the turret, and then mounted on top, you got a 50 cal remote operated or pintle mounted command operated by the commander out sticking his head out anti-aircraft. Blat and splat machine gun.
A stay-away helicopter more than an anti-aircraft.
Yep. It's got the 1200 horsepower engine. Now, we'll get onto that a little bit later.
The engine is extremely interesting.
Yep. It's got smoke launchers. They've also got 16 smoke launchers. 16 external launchers, 4 of which have got mounting HE, which I thought was quite... so they've got little grenades.
Okay.
So you can pop smoke or you can pop grenades if the infantry are coming to slap some mines on your tank or something like that and say, get away from me, you silly people.
Look, when you're... part of your use case is definitely war with India. You definitely want to be able to keep the enemy at bay.
7 forward gears, 4 reverse, range of 500 kilometres. Does have air conditioning, what a surprise, in a hot environment, and top speed of around 70 k's an hour. So reverse speeds, they again, nobody's actually stated it, but we're assuming around the 15 kilometres an hour in reverse, with the 4 gears in reverse. So
just to quickly jump in, hello Mehdi, nice to see you join us.
Hey,
and also
thank you.
Matt's Bernhard from Germany, Mehdi's from Maine. Looks like Mehdi knows a bit about loading tank rounds, but we'll keep going with what we know.
Or what we're making up at the time.
Yeah.
All right, based on the Chinese MBT 2000, which is the export version of the Type 92 LIIM made by the Norinco Corporation, the Northern Mongolian... Inner Mongolian...
Norinco just stands for Northern Industrial Company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there you go.
It's an English language acronym, so don't...
There you go. And as John was saying, the Type 90 wasn't actually picked up by the Chinese army. The PLA said, yeah, look, we've built this thing, but we're not going to actually use it ourselves. But they've started to put it out to the export market, and other countries have picked it up.
Now, let's get into one of the things that I think is clever about this tank, because this is not the best tank in the world.
No.
This is not the greatest tank at anything. It's quite expensive for what it is. What it is, though, is a functioning, quite good tank that Pakistan can build and maintain. And for Pakistan, that makes it a really good tank.
Yeah, again, while they can build and maintain it, there are a lot of issues that come along with it because
there are, but part of one of the cool things I've done when we'll get to the engine now, is that instead of building it optimally for a given hardware set, which is kind of where the Indians have fallen into a hole with Arjun, because they keep locking off components and trying to optimize around it, and then it gets out of date. They've gone for a modular approach for pretty much everything in this tank. And modularity is the enemy of optimization. So, the engine bay is larger than it needs to be for the engine it's got because they want to be able to maybe fit a different engine in it in future. So it's got a considerable amount of future-proofing built into it and also future supplier-proofing, which is really important if you're a country like Pakistan, which doesn't know who its friends are going to be in 2 weeks' time.
Yep, because as they saw with after the nuclear testing in the 90s, a lot of Western countries said, look, we're not happy that you're doing this, and so we're going to cut off arms sales to you. Which is why, when they started off with a British Perkins engine with a French transmission, so that's from the Challenger and Leclerc. They tested those out and found that they didn't work in the heat of Pakistan. However, the Chinese stuck with that version, and then for the MBT, for their export version of the MBT 2000, then Pakistanis tried the Ukrainian 6TD-2 diesel 1200 horsepower engine.
Which is an opposed piston engine, so we know claiming heritage for engines is fraught in tank YouTube at the moment, but obviously a design successor of the T64.
Yes.
Because it's coming out of the same factory.
Coming out of the Khaki factory. Now, what's interesting is that
and it is actually a similar design. So we're on a lot firmer ground here than certain other people we won't mention.
But what I found interesting was that both the T64 6TD-2 diesel 1200 horsepower engine from the T64, but they also had the Ukrainians also were building the Kharkiv factory was also building the gas turbines for the T80s, and yet the of the two of them, two engines coming out of that area, they've gone with the diesel engine because the gas turbines don't work as well in the heat and the dust
and the height.
And the height, yes, and at altitude. So
Pakistan has an enormous conflicted border at unbelievable altitude.
I have some great stories from somebody who has been fighting up there many years ago. Yeah, but
Tianjin Glacier.
Yeah. He was also I'll get onto that a bit later. So Ukraine has stuck with the diesel engine whilst the Russians have put in some more of the gas turbines.
Look, the T-80, and it's a tank we need to do, but it really crapped the bed in the Chechen War. Simply because basically you have to have an auxiliary power unit with a turbine engine, because if the turbine has to run continuously, then you burn through the fuel too fast.
Yep. The diesel is also more reliable, more maintainable. And
that gets to a tricky point because turbines can, if you've got the infrastructure in place for turbines, they can be super reliable, and they can run on more fuel varieties than the diesel can. But there is a technical threshold to build and maintain them that I grant you is much higher than a diesel engine.
Yeah, because if you can work on a big truck that's carrying lots of things, you're working on a big diesel engine. Therefore, it's you can pretty much do any sort of diesel engine. Again, with the limitations put upon the Pakistani government after their nuclear testing regime in the 1990s, they did have a German powertrain, I want to say, that the Chinese were...
They got a Renk transmission, I think, which is German.
Yeah, there you go. I know, it started off with the French transmission.
Okay.
So, anyway, so they
tried a lot of things.
Yeah, they had French, German, and British. I mean, putting a British engine in there, I mean...
Well,
they were trying a lot of stuff, and decided.
Look, I mean, given Challenger's undoubted success in various conflicts in Iraq, it was not the silliest thing in the world to trial it. But obviously, for their conditions and their maintenance people, and that's kind of cool to be saying. Our people trying to maintain it, didn't work out well. We need something that works well with our people.
Yep.
So good on them.
Yeah. So again, the Germans said, no, we don't want any bits with our technology, any tanks with our technology being exported to Pakistan, and so that's why they had to basically lean more upon the Ukrainian versions of the engine parts and bits and pieces.
And look, Ukraine. We get in trouble with things we say about Ukraine. We'll address that in the second half of the show. Hello, NAFO fellas, hate watching. But, prior to 2014, Ukraine was willing to sell things to anyone. They were selling, ballistic missiles to North Korea.
Oh, have you seen the new one? That the North Koreans have just launched their diesel-electric sub with nuclear warheads in it?
Yeah. Well, they only painted one side, but everyone does that. So the side where the dignitaries are going to stand. Anyway, back to tanks.
But yes, okay, built in Pakistan by the Taxila, Heavy Industries Taxila company.
Yes, who we've nicked some photos from their website, but they are credited.
The HIT they're called.
Yep.
Basically, it's just a big arms company in Pakistan that builds stuff.
But they have built a cannon making capability that looks to be really good. Until these things actually get tested, who will know? And being a nuclear power. What they do have that's relatively rare is a depleted uranium sabot for this gun, which should add some punch.
Yes. So it's a 125mm gun, another piece built by Ukrainians. It is compatible with all the Ukrainian rounds and ATGMs, including the combat round. And as John was saying, they also have their own depleted uranium rounds because they are a nuclear power. They have 24 rounds in the carousel, 15 rounds stored. So we're assuming... I haven't actually seen anything. I couldn't actually find anything useful.
It's got to be I haven't seen anything useful on what the autoloader is, but it's got to be a T-72 style carousel.
T-72's upright?
No, half upright, half down, but it's a carousel under the...
Yeah, but it's questionable. Was the odd numbers are upright, the even numbers are flat, I thought.
I think it's like 1 and 1.
No, but the 64 and the 80 were flat, and the 72 and the 90 are upright, I thought. Anyway, could be wrong. I can't remember. Didn't look it up. But I'm sure it blows off just the same because they don't have safe stowage for them with blowout panels or anything else like that.
As people have pointed out, the only tank in the world with properly separated ammunition stowage is the M1, the Abrams.
I thought the Leopard 2 did.
No?
Okay.
No, it's got quite nasty ammo storage. So everyone is... The next generation of tanks absolutely are all going this way. I think they've figured that out. And partly it's because modern top-attack munitions are deliberately targeting the ammunition in the fighting compartment. And let's be fair, T-14 Armada, if it ever exists, does also have cruise separation from...
Cruise very, very happy with that. Again, the Mark 1 autoloader is supposed to be improved, allowing larger rounds. Now, this is...
It's the length of the round to get the longer penetrator.
The longer penetrators. So, again, nothing's actually... I've read things about it, but there was nothing official that came out saying these are the different rounds they're making for it. So, we can only assume that they are making longer penetrators to fit into the autoloader for the Mark 1, but have not seen anything official. There's just... speculation and thoughts and a bit of propaganda, I feel like.
Yep.
There's a lot of propaganda about this tank, John, surprisingly enough.
Yeah. I mean, I do actually find the Indian and Pakistani online war nerd communities, they can get a little heated, and but they're actually quite well informed, extremely well informed, I'd say. Probably better informed than similar Australian communities.
Okay, well, that's because that's part of their lives. So
but they also do most of their work in English because it's kind of the lingua franca, for want of a better phrase.
French.
In their own countries as well, because these are enormously polyglot countries. Certainly India, thousands of faiths, thousands of religions, and not everyone wants to be giving the Hindus
Now, just remember, while we see Pakistan as a very small area country, it is the 5th most populous country in the world, 241 million people.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just very small compared to India.
All right, and China, which it does share a border with. It's a very narrow border.
Yeah.
Sorry, Or am I thinking Afghanistan?
No, I think Pakistan.
No, it's Afghanistan.
My ex Robin went down the Karakoram Highway from China into Pakistan and did not go through Afghanistan.
Well, there you go. They have a very narrow little window of trade opportunities across the narrow border. Anyway, talking about propaganda, I read a lovely little piece in some area or another when writing about the Mark 1. Compared to India, Pakistan is ultimately a small country.
Medium-sized country, I'd say.
It said, this is what it's reading as, with poor people and its industrial capacity is not strong. After India has entered the 21st century, its economy has developed rapidly, coupled with the fact that everybody loves it in the international arena. India has begun to purchase a large number of advanced equipment and improve existing equipment. In the case of tanks, India has upgraded the T-72M1 and earlier models of the T-90s using European technologies. Pakistan's original technical advantages have disappeared. The number of Pakistan's MBTs has not increased much because Pakistan is really poor and its GDP is only 1/10 of India's. Wow. That's whether or not there's a lot of feelings going into that. I feel that there might be some hard truths. It might also just be translation issues and or propaganda to get people going. But it's a case of that's how
I would say
some of the dialogue that's going on around the place.
Yeah, I mean, Hindu chauvinism is as ugly as anyone else's chauvinism.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all ugly. I would say, India has not been decisively superior to Pakistan in any of the numerous wars they've fought.
Mm-hmm.
They have generally come out better on points, but there certainly hasn't been any knockout blows.
No.
And what we are talking about here is not the relative strengths of India v Pakistan or even the relative merits of those countries. Far from it. We're just talking about this tank.
Yeah.
And this tank, for a medium-sized country with a quite poor economy, relatively speaking, is still a indigenous tank that will present a problem on the battlefield that has to be solved by the enemy. It's not useless. It's not the best tank in the world. It's not a Leclerc. It's not an M1. But Pakistan can't build a Leclerc or an M1, and they can't maintain them either. But they can build this. And even if they can't get the Ukrainian engines anymore, I don't imagine Ukraine's shipping too many of those right now. I
don't know what's happening in the Kharkiv factory, but I don't think they're shipping a lot. Well, actually, they might be just trying to get the money for it.
Money, maybe.
Yeah.
I think they're all going to Ukrainian tanks. But my point is simply that Pakistan has deliberately designed this so they have options. So that they can put a different engine in if they need to, or a different thermal side or a different fire control system. It has been built up from the ground up for that modularity, and that is very wise on their part and will give them a functional tank into the future that will, to some extent, deter the enemies they face. Now, Pakistan makes its own enemies in an enormous number of ways. But let's leave that to one side.
And I think that's really, that was the point I really took away from this tank. I don't want to sum it up now, but I'll throw it in there, is that their ability to take bits and pieces from different areas and not be reliant upon any one sole supplier of anything does allow this tank to have options, does allow the Pakistani government and their military to have options as to, okay, the Germans aren't selling to us anymore, we'll go to somebody else. The French obviously sell to anybody. The Chinese are quite happy to have export markets and essentially stronger military ties with other countries in the region. That's one of their big things, and trying to get countries away from the Western influence who are trying to buy their way into the subcontinent area. And but all at the same time, it's building up the local manufacturing of this tank. And I think we've said it before, there is a prestige that goes with and national identity with building your own stuff rather than just buying it for certain places.
There's strategic necessity as well.
Yes. So if you can't, if you're reliant upon another country to provide you with spares and or replacements, and they either cut you off because of choices you're making or change in their governments, and or they are involved in another conflict themselves and don't have the capacity to help you out, then having a indigenous manufacturing capability to build your own tanks is pretty important.
I mean, let's remember, a really good example of this is Australia in the Vietnam War went to into the war with Carl Gustavs.
Charlie G's are still going.
Yeah, they did, but the Swedish government said, "Oh no, you don't," and cut us off. For the duration of that conflict. So,
having negotiated all sorts of stuff for for Vietnam, the Swedish government was really fairly a bit put out by the Western countries and decided to invade. Anyway,
yeah,
and trying to be neutral.
The point is, being reliant on foreign suppliers is very dangerous for any country, and Pakistan is a country that has fought a lot of wars in recent times, and not always wars of choice. Not always wars of choice in the way of expeditionary warfare. You could argue that Pakistan started a lot of the conflicts it's been involved in. The other thing that happens with Pakistan is that having an actual worthwhile fighting military as a fully fledged Sunni state, the Saudis do very often tap them on the shoulders and say, "Hey, we need some muscle over here." Although it's worth noting, Pakistan had the good sense to say, "No, we're not going to Yemen. Stuff you." So
now, we'll get on to the Saudis later.
When we talk about Saudi influence, though, it is interesting that there are limits to their influence on the Pakistanis, and one of them is, we're not going to go fight the Houthis. Those guys are scary.
Yeah. So another Sunni affiliated Islamic State. ERA. Now.
Yes. And they've got NERA as well in their mix.
Sorry?
NERA, non-explosive reactive armour.
Oh, okay. But the main thing is a lot of the images of these tanks you see, especially for the
Al-Khalids, not the Al-Khalid ones, have the ERA bolted onto the turret, which looks dumb.
Yep. Yeah. Not only that, it's not on the hull. It's not on the. Yeah. It's not under the glasses. You might see some what looks to be little blocks, but that's actually track link. And it doesn't have all the fit outs, all the bits, the knobbly bits that you can actually fit the ERA onto. So it really says that they might claim that there is they can be fitted with ERA, but the ERA that's actually got in the images that we see online is very limited in its coverage. So it is not a well-protected tank. It is basically anybody with any sort of penetrator will go straight through the steel, composite armour.
This is, remember when we talked about Arjun, we noted that the Indians have hung onto, last in the world, a 120mm rifled gun. So it can fire a HESH round, high explosive squash head. Now, the only thing we can assume is that India did that because they think it will do really well against Pakistan's Al-Khalids.
It's also really good against buildings.
It is really good against buildings, but no one thinks it's worth the cost unless they've got a particular enemy that they think it's going to do well against. So, and that ties into what you were saying, in that it appears that the Al-Khalid is still very much reliant on steel armour in an era when that went out with the M60.
Yes. And look...
or the Chieftain.
Yeah, and with the Mark 1, what they've then done is they've removed the turret ERA that is on the tank, replaced that with the Varta Ukrainian active protective. Not active.
They're anti-laser systems.
Yeah, anti-laser system like the Shura, but the Ukrainian version of the Russian Shura. Basically, because of the positioning of it, they've had to remove the ERA from the cheeks of the turret, and they've then put that onto the hull. So the Mark 1 hull actually does have ERA. The sides of the turret have ERA, but the front of it, of the turret, does not. And so that's a big vulnerable part of the tank to not have ERA placed upon it. So it could be it would be a fine tank if they actually put more protection upon it.
But it adds to the weight, though.
Yes. And I've got to say, I was thinking one of the reasons why they might only have 39 or 49 rounds within the tank is for the weight restrictions. And so your weight restrictions do mean you can go over better, smaller bridges. You can go to higher altitudes.
A lot of mountain places this tank's meant to fight. So the weight limits get pretty hard. I reckon, I would guess, they've got a very hard 50-ton weight limit.
One of the other fun ones I thought of is what sort of how many variants? How many support vehicles of this tank have been made, John?
I'm not aware of any.
Exactly, because
they do still have a lot of old M60.
That's exactly right.
And
And you know what they're rated to?
50?
52 tons.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. So rather than saying, okay, we've got a new tank and we're going to get the bridge layer, the armoured recovery vehicle, the fitters track, all those sort of things, I said, you know what, we've got these M60s. They are still rated for the same weight as the Al-Khalid. So they'll just do the job. It's not like we're putting them into the frontline combat. They're just dragging away the whatever's left or putting it down the bridges for whatever's there. So they haven't needed to buy or develop because nobody's actually built any support vehicles for this tank, as there are existing ones that already work.
In general, the support vehicles come later in the life. Although it's getting long enough in the tooth, you'd expect.
Oh, it's 20 years old.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. We're getting there, but they do tend to come later in the life of the vehicle. But Pakistan are not, as we have discussed, do not have unlimited budgets on these things.
No.
But you've also got to say, for a country with a pretty limited national budget, particularly given the size of its population, choosing nuclear weapons was a interesting
very
path,
expensive.
But, also,
very expensive.
When India detonated its bomb, Pakistan felt it had an existential threat, and I wish they hadn't felt that, but I can understand why they did.
All right, so it does have a third-generation fire control system from the French. So this is the Mark 1. It has the...
So the Khalid one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to call it the Mark 1 just so I don't stuff up the pronunciation any more than I can.
Yeah. Sorry. As we discussed, it's an unbelievably difficult tank to talk about because you've got the Al-Khalid, which is the 1, and then the Al-Khalid 1, which is the 2.
But they're also designing the 2, which is looking,
probably might be a whole different tank, but
which is looking at a 1500 horsepower Ukrainian engine, which, as I was saying, is unlikely to be available for a while. It has improved thermal sights for the commander and an ability to use more propellants.
Sorry, we forgot. Pakistan claims it has a coat of paint that makes all the thermal problems go away.
Everybody's got thermal paint. Everybody's got thermal paint these days.
Magic thermal paint.
Thermal paint.
I did have a listener have a go at me with some good reason. Last time I went off about thermal paint, saying actually management of thermal signatures is really important. Correct. Management of thermal signatures is important. A coat of paint is not going to change it enormously, though. There's a lot of other things, but it's ducting your exhaust and...
Yeah, but you think about it, your 1 or 2% is what can matter if the crocodile helicopter, it was crocodile alligator KA-52
52, the crocodiles,
spots you at 15 Ks or at 10 Ks.
But the coat of paint doesn't make that difference, and also the crocodile...
It might.
The helicopter's up higher up in the air, so when you're doing things like ducting your exhaust, you're just creating a... Hit my mic. You're creating a hot plume.
I'm talking about for it spotting the tanks. So if it can spot, if it's got an 80% chance of spotting you at 15 Ks or an 80% chance of spotting you at 10 Ks, then there's a difference there of your survivability and somebody else's ability to get a man-pad onto that attack helicopter.
Yeah, you're right, but there does come a point where the heat has to go somewhere and will go somewhere. Now, you can do things like the F-22 and F-35 fighters dump an enormous amount of heat into their fuel tanks. There is a finite limit to how much heat you can dump into your fuel tanks before you have some very big problems. But for a while it can cool down your signature. So similarly, there are things you can do to manage your signature, but you are still, if your engine is running, you are generating heat and it's going somewhere and it will be visible. And a coat of paint is not going to make as much difference as certain people's press releases wanted people to believe.
Yeah. Anyway, as I was saying, the Safran Group from France have provided them with a third-generation fire control system. It provides all-round cameras, and this is the Mark 1, possibly the Mark 2, and increased range of lethality out to 3.5 kilometres. So, and vision out to about 9 kilometres. They also have a nice information battle management system, enabling better communications between teams and organisations. So that's where, if you're all going back to their command APCs, If the information's coming in from your recon elements, it's being broadcast and provided to the command, who then provides it to the tanks and or the attack helicopters and or the artillery, and so all that sort of fun stuff that actually links in all your combined armed forces into the same channel. So very useful as the military goes, and making sure that they actually are. It is a modern tank. It's not a Cold War era tank. It's just it has the technology to support all that, and the thermal imaging for the commander and the gunner are very and driver are all very important aspects for the tank, and it's got them, and it's got support. It's got modern versions of those in order to be able to see an enemy and engage them.
But this is where you get to the wisdom of this program, and I do think it's a very well thought out program. Yeah, that was my big takeaway from looking at this, was that makes a lot of sense for this country trying to build a tank. Not necessarily for any other country trying to build a tank.
No, just like the Macabre is built for Israel.
Yeah,
this is for Pakistan.
Yeah. So they've thought through these things, and one of the big things is, again, all these electronic systems. They put the modularity in. You know, it's like getting the cable ducts. Getting the cable ducts through the steel armour of the hull is stuff you got to do.
So, and at the end of it, is a case of, yes, we'd like to buy the French versions of whatever, or the Ukrainian or British or German. But at the end of the day, if they aren't available, we're going to go to China and be able to buy it from them, because they're the ones supporting this tank, and they're the ones selling this tank. And so they're going to be coming up with their own versions of the thermal images, the battlefield management systems, and everything else. And they might not be quite as good as the French version, but it's going to be available. They're going to sell it to us because they're not going to stop selling to Pakistan for anybody else's reasons. So it's there, and they have options. Whereas a lot of countries say, "Yep, we can only buy from the Americans, and that's it. We have to buy from them, and nothing else works in our tank."
We will talk about the trap Ukraine's found itself in later in the show. So we come back to a lot of clever things in this design. Now, we're aware there is a raging discussion happening in the chat, and I'm keeping an eye on it, guys, and I'm appreciating your points you're making. I'm just keep them coming, and thank you very much for that. Yes, Rob, what else you got?
Right, so the origin. So the Chinese Type 85 was not taken into service by the People's Liberation Army, was upgraded to the Type 90, focusing on the modular armour. Then the Type 90-2, which had to have certain European parts removed due to embargoes on Pakistan after the 1990s nuclear test. That's the German. So it was a German engine. And then they tried to use Chinese parts as a replacement for the European parts in the tank, but they weren't very successful. So that's when they've added in the Ukrainian engine, making the Type 92M, which was then relabeled to the MBT 2000 for the export market. And the Chinese now up to the MBT 3000, which Pakistan...
That's a bit of a jump ahead.
Yep, 1,000-year jump. But... which is essentially, I think it's, I didn't actually look into it too hard. Might be the VT4, which again, the Pakistanis have bought a number of the Chinese VT4s. So this gets me to another point with the Pakistani army of they have so many different variants of tanks. It's just not funny. It's not a case of they've only got 600 Al-Khalids and
600? I thought it was a smaller one than that.
No, they've got 600 of those,
wow.
and 150 of the Mark 1s. Plus, 150 plus of the Mark 1s.
Sorry, the Mark 1s or the ones?
The ones.
Okay.
So the Al-Khalid 1 and not versus the Al-Khalid. All right, so they've got 750, but they also have Type 59s, Type... the VT4s from China, probably some leftover American M60s, and a bunch of other... There is not a single source tank. There is multiple types of tanks. So, I mean, India has said, yep, we'll take... Yeah, we've built the Arjun, and we've got 100 and whatever of those, but mainly we've got T-72s and T-90s. Great. And so they've got a very focused logistics train of what they're maintaining, whereas with the Pakistanis, they have bought and have in service, if not on with their mainline units, with their reserve units, they have a huge mix of tanks and capabilities. And you got to say that's going to really add some pressure onto what you can maintain, what you can supply, and what's located where within the country. I think they might have. I guess the lack of funds, being able to buy in small amounts of things and saying, okay, we've got a budget of $100 million or whatever it might have been, and we bought 10 of these tanks, or we built 10 of these tanks, and that's what we can do and maintain. But we don't want to get rid of these Type 59s that are still floating around the place, because we can still maintain them on a shoestring budget without buying new ones and trying to refit everybody else. So it's really...
There is an issue with poor countries, for want of a better word or a phrase, but that what they can do in their military procurement that more wealthy countries can't is if they hire someone and they teach them how to maintain the engine on this piece of kit, that person will stay in that job for 40, 50 years. Because they don't have any other government jobs going.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Yep. So where you going? Yeah.
Yeah. India gets away with this in a huge way with its really weird diverse naval fleet, because they've got a guy down in the engine room who's been trained up on how to operate that engine type, and he's got nowhere else to go. So he will stay there for his working career. Whereas in wealthier countries, you might be lucky if they stay for 5 years.
Yep.
So you do have
I do like the comment. I'm sure the mechanics love the variety. You're right.
Yeah, but an individual mechanic can be kept with an individual piece of kit in these countries in a way that in Western countries it's just not an option, because they're moving on, they're doing other things in their lives. So it's quite a different worldview that we pretty much everyone who's watching this on YouTube. We're more used to armies where, particularly when it comes down to the metal bashers, in the units. I mean,
fitters.
Yeah, the fitters. I mean, you were a
logistician.
A logistician, Rob, and you were maintaining vehicles. How long was the average dude in your motor pool in the depot?
I was about to say the young fellows would get out after a while, but you did have a bunch of crusty old blokes who had nothing else in their life. And remember, I'm saying this as a 21-year-old lieutenant looking at a 36-year-old.
Who would have seemed ancient?
They've been smoking 2 packs a day all their life. They seemed ancient. Now that I'm 50, I look back and they say, they still look...
That young guy.
That 36-year-old still looked older than I feel now, all right? Because
2 packs of cigarettes a day, I'll do that to anyone. But yeah.
They were craftsmen they were apprentices from the age of 16. They joined in the army, and away they went. But most guys would get out after 5 to 7 years and after doing their apprenticeships, and they'd have a new life by the time they were 30, and we're hanging around. But you did have a number of guys who would just hang on, and that was their trade. They would do their trade, and that was their life, and they loved it.
I guess my point is that in countries like Pakistan, and some people would use the phrase third world, that's got a lot of problems, in particular this part of the world.
Developing.
Not even developing, but, the issue is that in Pakistan, they've got way more of those people who are going to
240 million, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they don't have a shortage of people with needing jobs and doing work.
Now, the poll is running that 78% say the Al-Khalid is good for what it is, and 22% say it's a bit meh. And, obviously I set the poll up, and it's a leading question, and it's both. Because as we've said, no one is going to pick this tank out of all the best tanks in the world. This is no Korean K2.
No.
Hell no.
And it also does not come with a price tag of that.
Yeah. You don't get a lot more. But what it is a very smart tank for Pakistan, and I think people do need to dip their lids to the people involved in this development process for getting a completed...
Sheev the Senate Palpatine. Hello.
Oh, hello, Sheev. Okay. I think Sheev comes from Mastodon, which is a fun social media thing that we are actually on that we should plug more. Okay, getting back to it. Very well thought out tank, not the best tank in the world. Well thought out, designed to do what it's meant to do. More to the point, they have gone for modularity over optimization. They have given up a lot in the process, but they have got themselves a vehicle that they can keep going into the future. No matter what, well, not necessarily no matter what, but despite what a lot of the vicissitudes that might come at them. So,
other users of the tanks. So Bangladesh has bought 44 of the. Which
is a really interesting one because we're going to get into Pakistani history.
East Pakistan.
Bangladesh started life as East Pakistan and fought a very bloody war of independence against Pakistan.
I don't know about that bit. So what I was going to go on to about. So I had dinner one night many years ago with a ex-Indian Army paratrooper. He was a warrant officer in the paratroop force, and he was telling me about in 1973 how they were parachuting into the Bangladeshi capital as the opening part of the war.
Yeah. Anyway,
opening part of the war and saying how his brother got caught up in a bloody TV tower and died there, and and how he went on. So he spent a lot of time, but he wasn't glorifying war. He was saying, look, these things happened. That was his life. And then he was telling me about what's the Kandahar part? No, not Kandahar.
Sianchan Glacier.
Yeah, and how the Pakistanis, even though they had the 105mm guns, they had a higher altitude, and so they could get more range out of their guns, whereas the Indian Army had the 155mm guns, but they were at a lower altitude and so couldn't reach as far, even though they had the longer ranged weapons. And so it was just an interesting night of him sharing his tales and saying, "Yeah, it was a thing that happened." That was within I was just born when the invasion happened, but it was one of those things.
Look, if folks listening are interested, it's the wars that have been fought in the subcontinent since World War II. A lot of really modern equipment has been used in ways that, aside from the Falklands War, hasn't happened. The Indian assault on Goa was, there were aircraft carriers, there were jet bombers, and there was a Western army in terms of the Portuguese army defending it, and it was,
and they're part of NATO and saying, well, come on,
Article 5.
Everybody, come and support Goa. This is our national territory.
Yeah, so the Indians did a really smart combined arms attack there that is very little covered by...
friend, thanks very much for hanging out and enjoyed the
What's in Store event. We're going to talk about that a little later, but thank you, friend. Anyway, my point was just that there's actually all this fighting in the subcontinent in the last 70 years is probably deserving of a little more study, because if you want to understand how it has actually put equipment to the test. The big one that we love as Centurion fans, is the fact that the Indian Centurions went into Pakistan and smashed the M60s.
Yep.
And
big time.
When you then look at the way the Centurions smashed the T-55s, for the Israelis, that's why we say Centurion was the best.
It showed it could outdo. It might have something to do with its rain, but yes. Yeah. Anyway, so Bangladesh has 44. Now they have the MBT 2000s, the VT 1As, which is the variant, is the export variant of the Type 92M with the 1300 horsepower Chinese engine and Chinese electronics.
How many horsepower?
1300.
Okay.
So better than the Ukrainians, but yes. Morocco has 150 of those as well.
By the way, can I say, I found out just this week, a horse has 18 horsepower. So bear that in mind.
That throws out the whole scale. The whole point is 1 horsepower, 1 horse. it wasn't carrying like a winch or anything, or some pulleys, or. Okay, so Morocco, the Kingdom of Morocco has 150. The Myanmar junta has bought 50. Sri Lanka in 2008 looked at buying 22, but the deal was cancelled. We're assuming because
they won.
They won their civil war in 2009 and said, "Well, we don't need tanks anymore. We've murdered all the."
Now, sorry, Rob. We have to make a correction. Tasman has pointed out, and he is correct. It was M47s and M48s that the Centurion came up against in
it was the M48s.
The Indo-Pak War. So thank you for correcting us. Thank you for giving us the chance to get the correction into the podcast now. So good stuff.
We don't know why it is. Okay, so we were saying, so we're assuming that Sri Lanka said we don't need these tanks anymore because we've won our civil war and murdered all the Muslims in the north of the country. Tamils.
Very, very different, Rob. don't do this again.
Start another online war.
It's Slovenia all over again.
All right, Peru looked at buying 80 to 120 of the tanks, but the deal fell through. I'm not sure where that's come from. Malaysia in 2002 looked at buying a bunch, but backed out of the deal. Again, obviously there's a strong Chinese population within Malaysia, so I don't know what's coming about there. Now, the fun one for me is that the Saudis trialled them in 2006, but eventually said did not place an order for them.
Look, the Saudis placed their orders not to have working tanks, but to buy influence in the places
which
they buy
is
tanks
what,
from.
Yeah, pretty much I was going to say. I'm going to speculate here is that what they wanted to do was to prop up the Pakistani army and another strong Sunni government with the armed forces that might be able to tap into the manpower of, because I think they're only about 60 million people in Saudis or whatever it is. Or am I thinking Iran? I can't remember. Either way, the point being is that this is my speculation.
Saudis have all the money, not all the people.
Yeah,
but,
and so they wanted.
And we're Australians. We should not criticise a country with all the money and not the people.
All right, so we've got and my thoughts are somebody then's come along and said, hey, rather than giving money to the Pakistani government, how about you buy some Abrams and give us some money to the Americans? And the Americans were very happy about that idea, so that's why they bought Abrams instead. This is all my speculation, but I'm assuming I'm going to guess it's right.
It sounds about right.
All right. Hang on. We got. There was one other point. We'll talk about beer soon.
Mm-hmm. We're going to go to a break soon because
the engine.
Desperately need to wee.
The engine, John.
Mm-hmm. The Ukrainian engine.
The Ukrainian 0 to 32 kilometers per hour in 10 seconds.
That's a bit slow.
Yeah, that is a bit slow. It's
it's a tank.
Yeah, it's not a very big tank. But
there are 3-cylinder 0.5 litre engine cars that can go quicker than that.
Challengers and Abrams and Leopards and Leclercs all do, but it doesn't have a lot of torque. So that is a real issue for this Ukrainian engine. It does not accelerate at the pace of other comparable. Even the T-72s have
are a bit swifter forwards.
Yeah,
not backwards.
Not backwards. No, not backwards, but. And I think that was only the real points I wanted to bring out about the Al-Khalid. We're going to come back with a beer review after we watch some of John's lovely trip to the Trelaw Centre of the Australian War Memorial and all the big things in store that are held out the back that you don't get to see.
Yeah, no, I'll just preface. So the Australian War Memorial has a better collection than you might think, and normally a lot of it's in the Trelaw Centre, and you can see these great amazing tank parks and things, but because it's the main museum's being redeveloped at the moment, let's not get into that. There's a lot of the main collections in the warehouse, and so as a connoisseur of the War Memorials collection, I was actually a little disappointed that most of what was available to the public was stuff that was normally in the main museum. so it was less able to see the really less well known, which for us is the more hidden, interesting stuff. Yeah, having said that, there are reasons why they need to get the big Lancaster Bomber G for George out front and centre, because people really love that plane, and an enormous number of Australians died in Bomber Command, so it's an important artefact. Anyway, so what you're about to see is about 8 minutes of not everything that was in there by any means, but the things that I thought were particularly interesting. There's captions on it. There's a little cool soundtrack. I think you're going to have fun with this, and we will be back in about 8 minutes to talk to you more about stuff happening in Ukraine and
beer and in Pakistan.
Yeah, all these good things. But right now, we're going to get some more beer and have a wee. Okay, and we are back, and hey, I mean, the folks who are on the live stream, you guys actually seem to really get into that. People who are on the podcast, so the video we've just shown is available on our YouTube channel. Just search for Totally Tanked, and you will get there. Okay. Quickly. Yep.
Say hello to those people we haven't said hello to before, from RC to Bjorn Palmquist. Mm-hmm. And there was somebody else in there, Jamie Stokes. I'm not sure if we said hello.
Jamie.
Oh, we did. Yeah, there we go. Mm-hmm. That was a number of years ago. Mm-hmm. But one thing I haven't said about the Al-Khalid is has not been involved in any conflicts as far as we know. It may be some internal insurgency activities, but
police actions possible.
Yep. So we want to say that we're very grateful that it hasn't been involved in any conflicts as yet. But in between Morocco with its lawless areas, Pakistan with its lawless areas, and Myanmar with its lawless areas, they might have seen some internal stuff, but no international conflicts.
Certainly no tank-on-tank action.
Yeah,
we can say that.
Yeah, so of those three countries. Yeah.
To go back to the video for the benefit of people who are watching on the video feed, Jamie made the point the Bushmaster Debbie is quite famous in Australian Memorial folks. Its actual name is Debbie Does Dallas, but for public consumption it's always presented as Debbie. And
I'm assuming it's part of D Company.
I don't know. Yes, Debbie is a really great example of what happens when a MRAP, a mine protected vehicle, goes over a landmine. There was one crew member lost his foot. The Australian War Memorial has a lot of audio recordings of interviews with him. If you, I wish I could remember his name, but I can't. It was an example of one crew member lost his foot, but everyone else in the vehicle was okay. Admittedly shaken up, but that's what a mine protected vehicle is supposed to do. And part of what I was showing in the video essay by putting the prototype in there is showing how slab-sided the vehicle looks, but those are all stowage bins and water tanks. And part of the design is that the weight of the stowage bins and water tanks are adding to the V-shaped hull by absorbing the blast of the mine or the IED that the vehicle's gone over. So yes, and in terms of other things in there, a freaking Mark IV, and just hidden away. You couldn't actually get to it. If I could have gotten closer to it, I would have gotten closer to it. Because Bobbington, the Tank Museum, has a replica Mark IV, and there's a real one sitting in this warehouse.
Just because we would have stolen it. Yeah. Like we did with the Mark VII.
Anyway, I have seen in that warehouse before archers and all sorts of other things. They weren't visible to the public on this trip. But one thing that we should mention is a significant number of people listened to us on this podcast and came to Canberra for the the event that we just showed the pictures from.
Big things in store day.
So I hope all of you put Totally Tanked in your responders survey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there for this trip, but I will make it. I will make sure. No, I'm available next time.
And we had a pub night, which went really well, and particularly astonishingly for us because. In general, this is a blokey kind of event, but so Sam, thank you so much for coming, and Jenny. We actually had two women at a Tank podcast meetup, which was astonishing. And a nice lady whose name I didn't get said she really liked our podcast when I was walking around the...
That was lovely. And I'm assuming wearing one of your
t-shirts? I was wearing a Totally Tank t-shirt to make it easy, but yes... that was cool. And we're not just a blokey podcast. We've never gone incel, and
no,
it was nice. But also, not just the ladies. Troy, thank you so much for coming, and Paul, and David, who we met at David Mitchell Hill Green.
Lovely.
The
author.
Because there are many author.
There are many authors named David Mitchell.
Yeah. Yes. And who are obviously our friend Nick and Cornelius, who are both friends of the show.
Yeah, Nick wanted me to lend him a t-shirt so he'd buy him a beer. I said, yeah, no. Buy your own t-shirts.
Buy your t-shirt. Yeah. T-shirts are at redbubble.com. Search for Totally Tanked. That's all cool. That was fun. So I think we've done that. Are we done with the Al-Khalid?
I think so. There might be one or two more things about Pakistan, but besides that, and now it's time for beer review.
Oh.
Yes. And what beer are we reviewing today, John? We might have done it before, but
the Qingdao.
Qingdao. All right. So. Surprisingly enough, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan does not have a
lot of export beers.
No, they do not have a huge beer industry, but they do actually have a brewery. And unfortunately, I could not find any of that. So the Murray Brewery is the only brewery within Pakistan because. Muslims are not allowed. Is illegal for Muslims to drink.
Issues, yeah.
It is illegal for them to drink, and it's for non-Muslims. They are allowed to drink, but they're not allowed to drink in public or be drunk. But it was established in 1860 for the British Army, providing alcohol for them, and they have. What's called their strong brew, which is their malt liquor. They have a stout and they have a pale lager. Yeah, as their options, and so they have.
It'd be nice if we could have got some.
I tried. There's surprisingly enough, there is not a huge export market to Canberra, even though. So that's why we've gone to the Qingdao because it is it's a Chinese beer. It's a Chinese influenced tank, and
it's Chinese Heineken or Chinese Foster's or Chinese Budweiser.
Yep.
Having said that,
it's easy drinking. We've probably done it before. Don't care.
You cannot express how much joy you can have to be cruising in a ferry down the Yangtze, trying to get from Chongqing down to Shanghai, traveling in fourth class where you can dip your feet in the water. And every 8 Qingdaos that you drink, you can return the bottles, and they will give you enough money to buy another Qingdao.
Yeah.
It was one of the happiest weeks of my life, it's just a German style lager. I think Tianjin is the town up in northern China that was on the coast that the Germans built their brewery and their colony, and then the Japanese took it in 1916. Might have been 1915.
So the Germans would have built it as part of the Boxer Rebellion, put down and say, yes, we're going to have the...
Just the settlements with the centre of humiliation, the settlements of China. Anyway, the Japanese conquered it for the Western Allies in World War One, but then it kept making beer, and turns out just like everyone else, Chinese quite like beer. They probably don't like beer as much as some other countries, but they like it a lot.
But it's a lot of them to like it.
Yeah,
I was about to say a small market there is worth a lot of money.
Yeah, but I would say a beer that is particularly tasty on a hot, humid day is what this is. Which is designed for China in summer. Okay, and you cannot believe how humid and hot China is in summer, unless you've been there. And this beer just is sensational in that environment.
Now, talking one last thing is the Canberra connection to Pakistan. For those that don't know, the Australian national capital city here in Canberra was designed by one Walter Burley Griffin back in the 1920s to be
earlier.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we were incorporated as a city in 1915. 15.
We had this in January 2003. It was not
2013. Yeah.
Mm.
All right, maybe. Well, I'm getting mixed up here. RMC was here in 2011. Oh, sorry, 1911. 2 years later, yes, so we were incorporated as the capital city. But it was designed
No one cares except us.
Okay. But Islamabad, the Pakistani capital city, was also a planned city based upon the designs of not by Walter Burley Griffin, because he died in the 30s in India, but it was based upon his designs of wide open avenues with leafy residential buildings and sprawling houses, and a capital area. And so it's, even though they're twice as they have over 1 million people in Islamabad, it has very Canberra vibes of the design of the city and the way it's put together, even though they have a lot more security around and bomb detectors than we do, which I'm very grateful that we do not have bomb detectors around, whereas Islamabad does.
Yeah.
So, yes, I just thought I'd throw that in there, that there is a connection between them. We are not sister cities as we are with Nara and Beijing.
And Versailles.
Really? I don't remember Versailles.
We established the relationship with Versailles, and then the French set off their bombs in Murat Atoll, and then we had a hissy fit, but it's still on the books. But also the Beijing relationship has not gone anywhere in recent years because we're on the nose of them too. Anyway, I wanted to just quickly note someone said something really insightful in the comments, but
it's moved on. You've all spoken too much.
You're doing well. Thank you, folks. Okay. Sorry, it was Mehdi talking about Robotine. Yes, we're going to talk about
Robotny.
I'm going to call it Robotine. You're going to correct my pronunciation of that Al-Khalid.
My mate Dennis.
Right.
It's all foreign, mate.
Do you want to do Robotny now?
Yeah, happy to.
Okay. We linked to on our social media in the last week a guy called Big Surge, who is a big brain military thinker, wrote a really insightful, well-argued analysis of just how horrific what the West is inflicting on Ukraine right now is, and particular the Robotny offensive. He argues at, like 2,000 words, stuff I've said in this podcast, particularly last month, in fewer words. So it's nice if people want to see more intellectual underpinning to see that. But the basic point is that the Russians have noticed that the Ukrainians are probing and said, oh, here's a weak spot. Do you want to come up here? And the Ukrainians are funneling an enormous number of young men are getting their legs blown off or just killed to do nothing more than cross minefields approaching what is going to be fundamentally a killing ground for them.
And they still haven't broken through the first line. So
they're nowhere near an actual line of defence. And they are... And this is the point, this is the big news when the Challenger 2 got blown up. We'll talk about that really soon. Is that the Ukrainians are throwing in their final assault reserves into what is just trying to even approach the first actual defensive line.
Yeah. And the thing is, I kept hoping that they would break through and get beyond the set defences, but the Russians are now... implementing further defences, more defences in depth than you're seeing on satellite images of them putting building where they had tank ditches before. Now they're putting in more defences around those tank ditches, including Dragon's Teeth and trenches and so forth. So they're actually they're realising that, okay, yes, they're going to get through here eventually, and but then we're just going to let them hit another line. Now, my hope is that somewhere the Russians will stuff it up, and there will be a gap, and the Ukrainians will be able to get through. But that's my hope, rather than any useful thinking, knowledge, or tactical nous.
No, and I want to totally be on the record saying my hope is that Ukraine could have suckered the Russians and drawn out the defences and find a point and breakthrough and and drive the Russians out of the country. That is my hope as much as anyone's. I do not want anyone to be thinking I'm on the record as being like, yay, Russia in this. Hell no. But let's get real. The poor Ukrainians are not being allowed to negotiate with the Russians by the Western powers that have backed them. And the second they try to cut a deal, they're going to lose the support they've had. And the support is really important to them. They're also incredibly endangered right now because they are fighting their way ferociously into a trap. And that's a terrible thing, with the losses they're taking. Yeah, and it's tiny. I mean, I think I've really outlined it quite well with for anyone watching the YouTube video. This is a tiny little salient they've managed to carve out.
They're probing along. They're still, I still maintain the idea of they're probing along the lines and trying to find somewhere that's they can break through easily, and they haven't found that yet.
No, but they're finding their way into Dien Bien Phu.
I don't think it's that. I don't think that's that bad. I think once they actually get in, make a salient, they'll be able to. The Russians probably won't be able to effectively counterattack because unless as soon as they provide any forces to that point, the Ukrainians will be able to hit them hard there.
Look, the thing that really pissed me off with this was last week we got on the ABC is our national broadcaster, and they get really angry when people like Elon Musk call them a state broadcaster, but that's fundamentally what they are. And in particular, these moments arrive when...
They're a Quango, mate. Quango.
Yeah. But the bald bastard turns up who's not part of the regular reporting lineup, but someone like, I'm going to tell you about national security because this is what the national security state wants you to know. It's like, oh no, this assault towards Tokmak, and they've got a bit of Robotyne, and this is great. Yeah, this is going to be the breakthrough, and the Ukrainians, they'll be able to bring up their artillery and cut off the highway, and it's like, no, they won't. If they bring their artillery up through this gap, it's going to get destroyed really fast. Now, I will say the Ukrainians, with a lot of Western backing to do it, have been really dominating the counter-battery space, and the Russians have been, on their Telegram channels, really grousing about how they're getting smashed in counter-battery fire. But Robotyne is, at the moment, no threat to the Russian lines. It is, at most, getting over the tripwires that the Russians have set out. And what is scaring me on behalf of the Ukrainians, is they are going to hit a point very soon where their assault has culminated. They just have no more left to throw into the assault. And the Russian counterattack could be awful.
Could be, but...
I hope it isn't.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing in that article that did hit home for me was how the mention of the Russians knowing where the ammo supply depots were within the area and just saying, you know what, we don't actually have to hit the people, we just have to hit those supply depots and blow up all their 155 rounds and take them out so that they can't shoot back at us. And that sounds like what they've been doing, which is why Ukraine is desperate for the other 750,000 155 rounds that the European nations have promised them and have not this year, but have not delivered. They've only delivered 250,000 of the million they promised. So.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the Challenger 2.
Yes. No Dorchester. There was no Dorchester on it.
Okay. Let's wheel back to that. My initial point, though, is simply that it initially hit a mine.
Yes.
And Challenger 2s, like any other vehicle, can have their tracks blown off by hitting a mine.
Yep.
The problem then arose that the Ukrainians
the crew got out.
The crew got out.
They left.
Yeah. But your problem then arises, the Ukrainians have no recovery vehicle that can move an 80-ton Challenger.
It also got hit by a ATGM.
No. That was once it had been sitting there for a while.
Yeah.
The Russians then brought up a Cornet missile. It seems to be the consensus.
Hello, Kilo 19. Welcome to the channel.
But my point is simply that having had their tank immobilized with no ready option for recovery, the Russians then brought something up and flanked it with a very heavy anti-tank guided missile. So this
and then just blew the turret off as per the T-72 on my T-shirt.
It
shifted.
It got blown up. Okay. It does not invalidate Western armour by any means. The Challenger 2, we knew from the second the British agreed to send their 12 Challenger 2s to the Ukraine that they had a different armour scheme planned for Challenger 3. But that was implied.
The point being is that they've shipped them without the Dorchester armour. They've basically they've put them. They've given them basically said we've pulled off all the stuff that makes it special, and we'll let you put on whatever ERA you want, but it's not ours because that's ours.
Well, I mean, Dorchester's built into the tank hull though. It's not an ERA bolt-on.
Yeah, okay.
But we don't know what they bolted into this, whether it was old school chop 'em. So I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. But the point is, for the Russia boosters are like, oh, Challenger 2, not that tough. It's like, we all knew Challenger 2s could be have their tracks blown off. We all knew that if you could get a heavy anti-tank missile into the side after the crew had bailed out of the tank, it could be destroyed. You haven't proved anything. What you have proved, the more significant thing that less people are talking about, is that Ukraine have committed the heavy punch still very early in actually reaching the Russian lines and are still taking losses because minefields. A daylight assault across a minefield is a dumb thing to do and has been since
1915.
At least 1915 and remains to this day.
Well, General Haig, what do you think? Yeah.
So, military tactics holds up. As we have said in the last episode, as I said in other places, when the Americans looked at the Iraqi defenses, not the Russian defenses, the Iraqi defenses in the Gulf War, they said, we're going to go around them.
Yep.
Going around the fixed defenses is how you do combined arms maneuver warfare. And what annoys me so much is you get these beltway people in the US, saying, oh, the Ukrainians just have most of combined warfare. And it's like, the Ukrainians know more about high-intensity peer warfare in this century.
Without air cover.
Yeah, without air cover than anyone else. And they're finding it a real struggle. But
which is why I think
you don't know any better.
Which is why I think they're probing around and they're trying to distract the Russians. They're happy for the Russian-born Ukrainian supporting militias to go across the border and carry out actions along the Russian border, but they're not willing to send their own forces across the Russian border, which realistically, if you actually wanted to go around the minefields, that's kind of where you're ending up. So going around the minefields and ending up in Rostov-on-Don rather than just taking Donetsk. But not advocating that sort of stuff, but it's one of those things that could where you end up. Now, Prigozhin.
Yes.
Ding dong.
Hot dog man.
Ding dong, the witch is dead.
When we talked about Prigozhin in a previous episode, we used the graphic billionaire brain because this idea that
it'll never happen to me.
The rules don't apply to you. And I remember being in Russia. I remember being in Moscow, and I used a business center to make a satellite call home to my parents. Just say, hey, I'm fine. I'm getting on this train tomorrow to go to China. And I remember when I got over and went to pay, I didn't have whatever they needed to pay, and I had to go to an ATM to get what I owed them. And I said, do I need to give you my passport? I didn't need to go around the corner to pay. And this woman just looked at me and smiled and said, oh no, I know you're going to come back. And I didn't take that as this is a kind-hearted woman who has faith in me. I took that as they are going to hang me from a meat hook if I don't turn up with their money. So I went very quickly to find the nearest ATM in this shopping centre, and I came right back, and they got their money. And but Prigozhin's been, a billionaire for so long. He's like, I can just, stage a attack against the state, and it's gonna be fine.
No, not against the state. Against the generals who are doing badly.
Oh well, that was his argument.
And he thought that everybody agreed with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And guess what? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, his plane had some technical difficulties.
Now, I'm going to throw a counter argument to Putin killed Prigozhin.
Right.
Because you might have noticed there's been a lot of coups in French-speaking Africa lately.
Yes.
And the Wagner Group had been propping up a lot of these regimes in French-speaking Africa.
Are they just drumming up more business? And he was holding them back?
I'm throwing out there I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just saying this is a might have been. The French might have been the ones who blew up that plane, knowing that Putin wasn't going to get too upset. And Putin can be like, I have no idea what happened there.
I'm not going to discount it as a wild conspiracy theory.
Because the French are entirely capable of blowing up that plane and blowing things up. That's something the French do. Let's talk about the Rainbow Warrior if you need to.
For those who don't know, the Rainbow Warrior was a Greenpeace affiliated sail ship. It was
a motor vessel, but it was blown up in Auckland Harbour by the French.
By French Special Forces.
It was threatening their nuclear testing.
Because the plan was for this Greenpeace ship to sail out to Mururoa Atoll and be around so that they could not let off a nuclear bomb. As French Special Forces boarded the ship, planted lipid mines, didn't go off exactly to plan. Somebody was on board the ship and died. One or two people.
One person died, I believe.
The New Zealand authorities basically took them into custody. The French then handed them over to the French, and they were given sentences to live on a South Sea island for a year or two for murdering people in an extrajudicial killing in another state.
But part of the fun of this was that the French had not accounted for how suspicious-minded the average New Zealander is. And when the word went out from the New Zealand authorities saying, hey, someone's blown something up and this is bad, everyone had notes saying, odd group of tourists in our caravan park. Like everyone in New Zealand had taken notes of these French people going around.
But realistically, it was a bit of a travesty of justice for the French when they sentenced the frogmen.
Yeah, they extradited them all.
They, when they sentenced them, they said, you need to go and live in Tahiti for a year or something like that, and you're not allowed to leave. That was their sentence for murdering these Greenpeace activists.
Anyway, so I've thrown out the idea that the French are not entirely out of the frame on this, but I would, totally, if I was asked to bet money, Putin would be my first, second, and third bets.
All right, now, John, what beer are we drinking now?
Oh, Jesus, Rob.
We are drinking Beer Lau.
Beer Lau Gold. Premium lager.
I didn't get the long neck.
Brewed with precious cow kai noi from a Lau brewery. Okay, this is a Al-Khalid reference, I'm guessing.
Well, I thought I couldn't find any beer from Myanmar, and Lao being next door to it. I thought, right, look, close enough, and I just wanted to support my local, have another beer besides the Tsingtao, and so I thought I'd grab this because it's not like, and I might have done this once or twice before. It's not like I'm going to get, we're going to review a Lao tank. So I thought, right, and I saw it. I could have gotten a Cambodian one, but I definitely was not going to get an Indian one, Indian beer. No,
don't start
I
that.
tried to find a Sri Lankan one because at least they were looking at buying them.
Now, if you ever get the chance, anyone who's listening, Sri Lankan breweries are surprisingly awesome.
Oh yeah, yep.
So if you see a Sri Lankan beer somewhere, give it a go.
Yep.
That's our top tip for you.
We've always loved the Sinha chocolate stout from Sri Lanka, so but I could not find it. So, but that's what I thought. We're giving Beer Lau a go, and I think it's pretty much falls. I have did drink plenty of beer lao in Vientiane, and it is pretty much exactly the same as the Tsingtao, but it's all right.
Let's go back to Prigozhin.
Yes.
He honestly thought that he could be forgiven for his.
From what I've read, in the Russian gangster mindset of the situations, those things can happen. It's saying, "Yep, you've done this, we've done that," and everybody just moves on with their life, and it doesn't mean anything. But obviously, I think
my experience with gangsters, you cross them, they kill you. And I wouldn't say I've spent a life of crime, but I would say I've crossed gangsters a couple of times, and I have left town when I've done it. Just left town.
Those East London pubs, you're not going back there again 30 years later?
There's East India Dock Road is not a road I ever plan to walk down again in my life. I'm not even going to talk about what I did there. It was fun though. Anyway.
All right. Okay. Other things. Australia's decided the talks about Australia within Australia that we're going to get rid of the army battalion in Adelaide.
Okay. Yes. Didn't they just move to Adelaide? Didn't they just?
That was 10 years ago, right?
But they had a huge ceremony in Adelaide where they had the chaplain and the tanks, and
probably
it upset a lot of people.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no. So it was actually under the last. I was thinking to myself, they moved them there as part of the last Liberal government trying to shore up votes within and provide jobs within the Adelaide area. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't actually. It was actually under Labor, under K-Rudd.
Okay.
In 2010,
that they made the decision. Kevin Rudd.
Yep. They made the decision, and might have already been in there, but it's surprising because they're trying to push defence stuff to Adelaide in order to provide jobs there. Because besides wine, what else is there?
Uranium mining. But,
yeah, true, and bombs. Lots of missile testing.
Submarines.
Yeah. Yes, our nuclear submarines will be designed and built and so forth there. Because,
they will not.
Anyway, so there is a speculation that the infantry battalion, I can't even remember, it's 5 or 7, is basically said, yeah, you know what, we brought you down from Darwin, probably because not everybody wants to live in Darwin, but it looks like they're going to send them back up the Garn Railway and send them back to Darwin.
Yeah. Now. Going back to Ukraine, one of the things that struck me in the last month was that the number got revealed of how many Leopard tanks have actually been sent to Ukraine.
1s or 2s?
60. Leopard 2s.
Oh, okay, cool. Yep.
60. Which is not an insignificant force, but it's not a war-winning force against the entire Russian military.
No. Yeah. No, but it's
need a lot more Leopard 2s.
Well, you want your breakthrough force to be able to carry out things. Yes, how's that Australian nuclear sub program going? It's going great. The Republicans in the US Congress have said, you know what? These Australians, they're only stumping up $368 billion. I don't think that's enough.
No, here's the problem. Here's the big problem. And it drives me nuts watching Australians being competent in these ways. If you want to get something through the US Congress, you need to pay off all the congressmen and all the senators. You've got to pay the buggers, right? And if these guys are saying, I'm going to hold this up in committee, it's because you haven't paid them yet. It's not hard. And the biggest scheme of this program, it's not even that expensive.
Because the US Congress is worried that the American only has 49 nuclear subs.
Well, very few of them are actually operational because they have some
problems. They should have 66, and therefore, how can they sell 3 to the Australians over the next 10 years? Therefore, Australia really should be putting up a bit more money and saying $368 billion for subs that we're never going to see anytime now.
And don't actually have any usage in any sane Australian strategic framing. It's it'll be funny to see how the whole thing goes, but somehow the Australian Labor Party, which is currently in government in this country, has managed to sign off amongst itself despite their anti-nuclear platform to do this. So
Well, they're not building a nuclear system. They're just using it to power their subs.
It's still going to be required.
They'll be at sea. They won't be on Australia.
But there's also these sorts of things like, all these radioactive isotopes build up in the coolant systems on these subs and have to be disposed of on a pretty regular basis. And anyway, this is well outside the scope of a tank podcast, but the whole thing's a nasty joke and we're paying a lot of money for it. But anyway, we've done Prigozhin, we've done the Challenger 2.
And Prigozhin looking like the Pope?
He does look a lot like Pope Francis.
He did.
Yeah. The ears are a bit different, having done the graphic. But yeah. Anyway, I guess.
And one last thing, we did make the big press in the Canberra.
The Canberra Weekly.
Yes. Yep. On Thursday, our article came out, and we're looking fabulous. We did.
You look fabulous.
You look fabulous.
Oh, I look just as good as I look. But. Yeah, so it was funny because, Canberra Weekly, not an insignificant media outlet, but we did have an uptick of people getting in touch with us saying, I wrote a military history blog and in Canberra and I don't have any friends to talk to. And it was like, okay, well, we'll bring you on for the halftime show, because we're generous. We want to encourage other folks.
And they're probably more knowledgeable than us, but they probably don't drink as much beer.
Maybe. Who knows? But it was funny. So Rob, thank you for being my friend. I can do this podcast.
Thank you for inviting me on, so we can hang out together and drink beer.
Because this is what sets us apart from other military podcasts is having a friend to talk to about it, which is the weirdest thing, but it's actually really important. Yes, but my bigger point was that our uptick in listeners from our feature in the Canberra Weekly was inobservable. Whereas Radio Warnerd, we get some listeners from Radio Warnerd. So thank you, Radio Warnerd folks, for joining us.
Love to listen. And
anyway, we still appreciate Canberra Weekly for giving us the profile, and we look forward to doing some collabs with the other military history podcasters in Canberra.
Which there are many. All right, take care, all. I think we're done.
You're clapping us out, are you, Rob? All right.
Well, what do you think we need to go on to?
No, I think we're good.
We can ramble on for another however long we feel like, but
I think we are about done.
The poll. How did we go in the poll?
Okay, so the Al-Khalid is a bit meh. We've got 21%, and Good for What It Is got 79%. And as usual, I think the poll came out in a very solid way. There's a very heated debate going on in the comments on this video about the value of the Javelin missile. But Mehdi, have a good night. Tasman, have a good night. Everyone who's on the feed, have a good night. And everyone who's listening to this later, we hope it sounds good. The Panther was our most listened to episode in its first month. And
with all its technical difficulties.
Whereas this one, which will get nowhere near it, is pristine. Yeah, that's life.
Take care, all. We'll see you next month.
Producing your own. It's hard. Okay. Thanks, folks.